Hello there. You're an artist too, aren't you? And you must be thinking to yourself, no, I'm not an artist. I don't paint. I don't do those Renaissance stuff. Yeah, well, I'm gonna stop you right there. An artist can express art in many different ways. You could be a painter, an illustrator, a graphic designer, or even a sculptor. That counts. You could be a musician. You could do music. You could be singing. You could be composing. Or maybe you're a performer. Perhaps you enjoy dancing, acting, doing theater. Or maybe you're a writer. You enjoy writing prose or poetry, commanding words at the fingertips. If you do any of that, I guarantee you are an artist. And I'm sure you've had thoughts every now and then. Every time you look at your art, your works, you must have had thoughts like, I'm lacking something. This is not good enough. I don't like what I've created. This is not good enough. This has to be flawless. This has to be perfect on my first try. And if you had thoughts like that, well, welcome to my TED Talk. I'm Piso, and I'm here to talk about how perfectionism can affect an artist's well-being. Let's get started. So what exactly is perfectionism? Well, a lot of people have described it as demanding high performance from oneself based on excessively high standards being set. These standards usually being perfection, which is usually impossible to achieve. And usually this perfectionism manifests in two ways. Because when you want to strive for greatness, when you want to achieve a really high goal of sorts with your craft, usually that pushes you, that gives you drive, that gives you motivation to work harder to be able to achieve this goal of greatness. But sometimes you lose your way. Sometimes you get too burdened, too overwhelmed by this desire to achieve greatness, to achieve success through your work. And that often leads to a fear of failure, to a fear of making mistakes, to not want to be wrong, to want everything to be flawless on your first try, to want everyone to recognize that you could do no wrong. And that usually leads to perfectionism, a bad kind of perfectionism, the type that would ruin you. But why? Where does this kind of destructive perfectionism come from? Well, for one, people yearn for approval. They love being recognized for their works, for their efforts. They want to be recognized as great, not just good, great. And they usually want to be perceived as the pinnacle of perfection, the paragon of success, like the prime example of all things good within their craft. And usually that's normal. It's normal to want approval for things. It's normal to want to strive for perfection, for great things. But sometimes when it gets too much to your head, you become overly critical of yourself. You start to think that you're lacking, that what you know is not enough, or what you know too much to be able to have fun with whatever it is you're doing. Like you think to yourself, No, that can't be right. This composition isn't working for me. This is not. These lines are not straight enough. These colors are not bright enough. This and that, you know. And because we're so hard on ourselves, we fail to appreciate the kind of effort that we put into our work, the journey, the process in which we create art. It becomes taxing. Everything that we create becomes ugly in our eyes simply because of our excessively high standards that we set for ourselves. And usually because of this dislike for our own creation, because of this hatred, oftentimes we feel envy for others who are able to achieve this level of perfection, this level of greatness that you yourself have yet to achieve. You think to yourself, why couldn't I reach that? Why couldn't I draw like that? Why couldn't I write like that? And this envy, eats you up to the point that nothing you ever do will be good enough. Nothing you create will ever reach that level of, the level in which you wish to reach. And that's bad. Because that leads to a lot of things. For one, it leads to anxiety. It makes you afraid. It makes you nervous. It makes you not want to know what others think of what you've created. Leads to depression because you're never satisfied with what you've created. It leads you to this pit of despair, thinking, why couldn't you reach that? Why couldn't you be that good? And because of those feelings, you often will procrastinate. You'll take your time, doing things. You'll take your time starting on art because you think you're lacking. You think that you don't have the skills to start doing this, to start on this piece of work. You don't have the knowledge. Maybe you're afraid of what others would think once you start this. You're afraid of what you will think when you start this. And in turn, this leads to low self-esteem and low self-confidence. Simply because you don't think you'll ever be that great. In your journey, in your desire of wanting perfection, you think you will never reach that because it's far too high and you worked far too hard to work for it, only to reach so low, to hit mediocre. So what can we do about this? How can we stop ourselves from thinking that we will never be good enough, that we will never reach perfection? How do we get out of this perfectionism mindset? Well, I myself am a victim of perfectionism. I definitely don't draw a lot these days simply because I think to myself that the expectations of others put upon me are far too high for me to reach. But you know what? Sometimes when I'm not burdened by such thoughts, I think to myself, it's okay to mess up. It's okay to make bad art. It's okay to not be great. Because at the end of the day, every mistake is a learning process. Learning is part of our lives. If everything was perfect, how do we learn? How do we know we could improve on ourselves? How do we know that there are other ways to achieve greatness? As I would like to think, you don't have to achieve perfection, because perfection is virtually impossible. What you should strive for is greatness. Strive to be better, not to be perfect. Thank you.